Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad you're here. We are happy to introduce our Arizona authors and have them share with us a little bit about their book and their books. And I think we'll just start by maybe Amy, you can introduce yourself. Amy and I will be co-hosting and asking questions, and then we'll have chance at the end for the participants to ask their questions too.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Trueblood, and I am the author of 2 young adult historical books, Nothing But Sky and Across a Broken Shore. I've lived in Arizona since I was 10, and I went to high school and college here, and my general brand of books that I love to write are stories about women and girls in history that you don't know anything about, but you should. So it's very much a passion of mine. I love historical research, and it's just the place that I am the most happy. So hopefully I have more of those books in the future that I can share with you guys.
Great. All right, let's just kind of introduce our authors, and we'll start with Lori, and then just say hello and maybe the books that you're going to talk about, and then we'll start back with having each of you individually share something more about your books. How does that sound?
Okay, so I'm Lori Alexander. I am in Tucson. I've been writing about 14 years and just had my 10-year agentversary last year. So I've been with my agent for about 10 years. And I have 14 sales so far in various stages. Some are out, some are still in the pipeline. And I write board books, picture books, and nonfiction chapter book biography, STEM type stuff for about 4th to 6th grade readers.
Excellent. Kelly?
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm from Gilbert, Arizona. I write young adult books, young adult contemporary thrillers and horror. I collect stickers and I'm addicted to coffee. Yay.
Great. Monica?
Hi, my name is Monica Brown, and I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I have 2 books out this fall. One is about our very own Diana Taurasi from the Phoenix Mercury, nonfiction chapter book with Chelsea Clinton's She Persisted series. And I have my picture book, which is what El Cuarto Turquesa, the Turquoise Room, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm a professor of English at Northern Arizona University, and I write fiction and nonfiction picture books for children. Most are bilingual or available in multiple languages. And I am the author of several chapter book series, including the Lola Levine series and the Sarai series, and coming up a series about a mermaid spy that is going to be called The Fantastical Tales of Mari A. Fish. So a little bit about me. I've been writing for a long time.
Great. And Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Gerin, and I live in Vail, Arizona, about 10 miles outside of Tucson. But I'm coming to you today from the U of A World of Words Children's Library. I had a panel here earlier this morning. Like Lori, I basically write a lot of STEM books, biographies, creative nonfiction, and my current book is the biography of Rosalind Franklin, Rosalind Looked Closer.
Excellent. And we also have Cynthia Harmony, who will be hopping on as soon as she gets home from the event that she and Lisa were at earlier this morning at U of A. So let's start with, does anybody want to raise their hand to go first, or shall I just choose? Or Amy can choose to introduce, your book, your work, and share maybe a little bit about the story that you're going to talk about today. Amy, you want to pick someone?
I was going to say, who volunteers as tribute?
We all volunteer. I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go first. Okay,
go ahead,
All right.
Kelly.
Okay, so I'm Kelly, and my most recent book is Go Hunt Me. It's a young adult horror book, and basically it follows a group of film students who want to make a short student film about Dracula. They get an opportunity to go to Romania to film their movie. And once they get there, they're trapped in this kind of remote, creepy castle where they all start getting murdered one by one. And so I was just going to comment, quickly about the inspiration for the book. What inspired the book was, I know we're not supposed to read our reviews, but I read my reviews. And so like my other books, I was constantly kind of getting like these reviews that like my female characters were unlikable, and I was just getting super frustrated because I just felt that my characters were just people, like they were just female people, like making decisions and sometimes bad decisions and sometimes good decisions, but they were just human beings, and I was getting really, really frustrated. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this book about this character, Alex Rush, and she's going to just be perfect. She's going to be polite and nice and kind and never have any contrary thoughts and just be super cooperative and happy all the time. And then like, we're just going to see what happens, like when she gets, put in some of these situations that are difficult. And I often think that sometimes people that are really lacking in agency are kind of like the internally like most messed up people. And so that was what the kind of the jumping off point of the book wound up being about. So that's me. I'm Kelly, and let's go hunt me.
Okay,
And now someone else has to go. I'll just keep the one.
I know.
Laura, you just go.
Laura, you want to go? You're muted.
Okay, here we go. Well, thank you for letting me talk about two books. It's funny how you sell to different publishers at wildly different times, and then you have two books coming out within a few weeks of each other. So today I am here to share Mini Mighty Sweeps, a picture book from HarperCollins. This guy. So it's just a fun wordplay, lighthearted, no helper too small kind of message, days of the week. I'll read a first couple pages just to give a feel for it. It starts, it's illustrated by Jeff Harder, who did such a good job bringing the character to life. So here's a little look inside. Sweeps is a lean green cleaning machine. Check out her bristly brushes, spritzy sprayers, and her hopper for holding heavy hauls. What a mighty machine. But then we see, but when the other trucks rumble past, we see her down here. Later, little squirt, see ya, stubby scrubber. Bye-bye, teeny cleany. So it's just a book for truck lovers. It was actually sold to Harper in the second book of a 2-book deal from my very first book, Backhoe Joe, way back when. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more after the introductions. The second one is a board book, and I sold this one to the same editor that bought my Future Baby series at Scholastic, and it's called You Are Getting Sleepy, beautifully illustrated by Monica Mackay. She did the illustrations after her own young son, which was really sweet to hear. And it's just like everything routine, getting ready for bed, where everyone is getting tired except baby. I'll show you my favorite picture. I miss these days. It's just like trying to tire out the kid, and they're just
so cute,
as awake as ever. But yeah, she did such a lovely job with it. It's so sweet. Finally, at the end, everyone can go to bed. But yeah, so both of those were sold to editors, publishers that I already had a working relationship with. Yeah, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right.
Monica, did you want to go next?
Muted.
Monica, yes, I'm
Monica.
muted. What a Ricky move. I'm a professor who's been teaching on Zoom. I stayed muted. Thank you. These are so delightful. I was thinking of your books. So again, my name is Monica Brown. I'm super excited. I'm going to talk about this book, The Turquoise Room, El Cuarto Turquesa, beautifully illustrated by Adriana Garcia for Lee and Low, publisher I have a long relationship with. This is an homage to my mother, Isabel Brown, and I'm sitting here because her painting is behind me. She was an artist. She was born in Piura, Peru, and her mother, who didn't have much of an education, named Esther, was still creative. I wish I could share. I have little pieces of cardboard coasters my grandmother Esther Valdivieso painted. That's her art, and I have a map she made of Peru. So I guess this book was an opportunity. I see it as part of a trilogy in a way that started with 3 books for Lian Lo. The first, Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match, No Combina, about a little girl not unlike myself who had a Peruvian mother and a North American father and is fierce. And then more recently, a story about an indigenous Peruvian, the founder of Peruvian archaeology, Charuco Julio Ceteo. And just to give you that background, my mother, when she lived in Lima, Peru, as a teenager, she lived on Julio Ceteo Boulevard. So this opportunity to write about my heritage as a Peruvian American and about really a book about creativity and about the way we teach children to dream and be creative and pass it down. My mother was an artist. I am a writer, and you get to see my 2 children, Isabella and Juliana, in the book. It's so special. And my mother's actual art pieces are incorporated. I'm going to go ahead and just read the first 2 pages maybe, and then read the end, because it's about how, regardless of our limitations, our challenges, my grandmother died very young at 41 of autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, which my mother also died too early from at 63, that I share. And I was the recipient of a beautiful gift of life from a deceased donor, and it'll be 4 years this December. So it's a celebration of creativity in times of struggle and the legacy and what we pass down to our daughters. So I'm just going to read the first few pages in English. More than a century ago in Peru, the land of the Andes, the Amazon, and the floating islands of the Uros people, there lived a young girl named Esther. Esther's favorite color was turquoise, the color of rivers and lakes and the blue morpho butterflies that lived in the rainforest. Esther loved to draw and paint on any little scrap of paper she could find, and at school she painted a magical map of America del Sur. She dreamed of exploring the whole continent of South America and the wide world beyond. So this is a depiction of my grandmother, and I have that map in my study on the wall that my grandmother made at 11. And although Esther couldn't leave her parents' home to go adventuring, she used her imagination to ride the wind of her dreams. At night, Esther closed her eyes and floated up and out her bedroom window. She spread her arms wide and flew to the places on her magical map of wonders. Esther's imagination was as big as the sky. And then just to give you a sneak peek, we see how it is embodied and passed down, this ability magically to fly, both literally in this magical realist book and then also in dreams. And so this last scene in the last page in the book, and you can see Isabella and Juliana on the blue morpho butterfly's back, which is also the rich color of turquoise, which was my mother's favorite color and my grandmother's, who had a turquoise painted room in Piura. The character of Monica, and it is fictionalized, is telling her children right before they go to bed. Niñas, Monica said, as she tucked her daughters into their beds one night when they were back home. This is the secret of the turquoise room. If you close your eyes and open your minds, you can ride the wind. Just try. Grab onto your dreams, hold tight, and fly. So that's my introduction.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
How about Lisa?
Hi, I'm a former elementary school children's librarian, and with my story, Rosalind Looked Closer, it's really my love letter to one of my heroes, an unsung hero of science, Rosalind Franklin. I always, saw a need for more picture book biographies. And so I started to write them myself about 10 years ago. And I've written a few about scientists, a few about unsung women in history. But Rosalind was the first one I sold, and it was a long road to publication. But I'm only too happy that this is the year of Rosalind Franklin, because I think there are three other books published about her this year. One with the Chelsea Clinton, She Persisted, written by Kimberly Brubacher. And there's yet a fourth one coming out in February with Little Brown books for young readers. So, a lot of publishing is timing, I guess we could say. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the genesis of the book, because my book was originally a 32-page, traditional picture book biography. But because of COVID and it being pushed back about a year from the publication date, I got to include about three or four more pages about Rosalind Franklin working with viruses. And that kind of really opened up the whole book, the back matter. I think it became a whole different book than what was written originally, and what was purchased by Beaming Books in 2020. But I really have my editor, Naomi Kruger, to thank for that. She really shaped the book and turned it into, more than I could ever have imagined for my debut. So I'm just, overjoyed that it's also been so well received this year by librarians in public libraries, and especially school librarians, as I come from that background. But I'm not going to read a part of the book, but what I think was really important was the idea that my artist took a lot of the early life of Rosalind and her interest in nature. And one of my favorite spreads from the book is how she took the strand of DNA, and in the last page of the book, she turned it into a plant. Let me see if I can show you that one. This is probably my favorite spread right here. How the DNA branches off and splits and turns into a growing leaf or plant. So it kind of, to me, the book really has a lot of not only science about DNA, but there's a lot about nature in it. And I tend to write about nature, plants, animals, not just people. I try to find stories that are unusual, that are things that may not have been told before.
Excellent, thank you. And Cynthia, thanks for joining us. We're glad you could make it. We mentioned that, I think we mentioned that you would be joining us a little bit late because you and Lisa were just at U of A. So tell us where you are and a little bit about your debut experience and the book.
Yes. Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be with all of these great creators today. So excited. So yeah, I'm Cynthia Harmony. I studied psychology in Mexico City. I'm from Mexico City. And then I studied education in Spain. And then I published textbooks that had to do with my research. And then after that, I was like, you know what, I want to publish more, but I want to focus on children's books. So that's what I did. And then this is my, like you said, Dan, this is my Cuidad Sings. Here, it's my debut. So it's in English and Spanish, and that's not how it was originally planned. It was only going to come out in English, and then my editor, 6 months later on, after I asked my agent to ask about the Spanish edition, they finally came back and said, like, yes, we're gonna add on the Spanish, and that was a wonderful news for me, because that was my goal, to have my books in English and Spanish. So yeah, do you want me to talk a little bit about the debut experience?
Yeah, well, first, can you read a little bit of the book, or?
The book? I will tell you a little bit about, I'm not gonna read the
Maybe the
spread.
inspiration too?
Yes, I will tell you a little bit of what it's about. And I just wanted you to show that it's a little girl and Pancho, her dog, and they're in the city, in Mexico City. So this story was inspired by a real event. It happened in 2017 in Mexico City. There was an earthquake. People that live in Mexico City are used to earthquakes. They happen all the time, but some are stronger than others. And in 2017, it was pretty strong. And what happened is that people just came out on the streets. They were just helping each other. They just found ways to help each other because they're used to these, and they knew that they could not wait for international help or all the help to come. They just took matters to their own hands, and they just helped each other. So it was like a lot of generosity and kindness, and people just connecting the community. And I thought it was really inspiring and moving. And I wanted to write that story because I didn't think there was enough stories out there where our communities were shown that way in a positive light. So I wanted to have that when this particular community was an inspiration around the world, because it had hashtags. It was like all over the place, and it was really truly moving. So that's what I did, and then I used my dog Pancho in the story, and he was an amazing dog. He passed away a couple of years ago, and it just feels so amazing to have him in this book, because he was just that kind of dog. He just gave comfort and love, and he was just that kind of that energy. So I think it's very fitting. And I wanted to show just one spread of the book. This is illustrated by Teresa Martinez, who is a Mexican illustrator, and she lives in Puerto Vallarta. And this is published by Penguin Workshop. And then one of the spreads, there are so many amazing spreads because Teresa is so good with details, but I want to show you one in particular, this one. So I will read it in a second, but I just want to show you that the little girl finds also a way to help in her community. And it says, as the day echoes into night, the dust settles, with Pelusa now safely tucked in his arms, Don Polo chants, Canta y no llores. Canta y no llores is a traditional Mexican song. And I wanted to share this spread because this is something that actually really happened. When around the evening of that day, where people were helping each other after the earthquake, there was sadness, there was like confusion, and people were getting tired. So someone spontaneously started singing Canta y no llores, and then everybody joined in, and there was a chorus. And there's videos that you can look. So that's just like, it just makes me want to cry right now when I talk about it. But it was really moving, and it's so special that it's also made it into part of the book. It's a spread that's actually what really happened. So that's a little bit about the book.
Great, thank you. Well, now we're going to kind of give everyone a chance to answer a few questions specific to your books. And those who are attending can please put any questions you have about writing, about publishing, any sort of question that comes to mind. And Amy, will you start us out with our first question?
Sure. So the first question goes to Kelly, and it's this. As the YA market continues to get competitive, what kinds of things do you think a writer needs to do in order to stand out in such a crowded marketplace?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question quite a lot because I do think publishing is a really it's always been kind of competitive, but I feel like it's especially competitive right now. I feel like in young adult, the thing that's happening is just you've got to have a really big, simple hook that can be summarized in like a couple of sentences in order to really get some attention, you know, kind of like an asteroid is going to hit the earth and it's going to hit Buckingham Palace and there's a romance happening inside, you know, something that's just like got kind of huge stakes and very easily summarized so that people in marketing know how to help you. I kind of think that like if you're a debut author or you're somebody that, you know, that's like kind of new on your path to publishing, your book has got to be really, really well polished when you're going into the query pile these days. I mean, probably like more so than it had to be in the past. Like it's just got to be bordering on being perfect, because if there's any kind of a reason that an agent or an editor can say no, they'll take that reason. So that's kind of how I see the market right now.
Thanks. That's an excellent answer.
I think that applies too to everybody these days. I mean, we've heard a lot about how overwhelmed editors are. You know, staff has been cut. A lot of people are still working from home. And so it's true that it needs to be really clear what the big idea is of your story. And I like the idea of summarizing it in a couple of sentences to make sure you've really got something that's easily understandable. Great. Okay, Lori.
I might add to that in the
Yeah.
realm of picture books and chapter
Sure.
books, because I really think it's challenging for debut and newer writers trying to break in, and even people that have just published one book or two books. And so I guess I have two things to add to the excellent advice from Kelly and Diane. One is that in times when it's hard to break out, coming back to craft and quality, I know like for my very first book way back, winning a big award, those starred reviews, those really help establish a career quickly, or to break through. So to not think it's only marketing, because I know for me, my early burst came through getting the Americas Award, getting other types of things, getting a Christopher Award. And so to still think about craft. And then the other thing to be, I publish both with more mid-level, well, mostly Lee and Low mid-level publishers, as well as my publishers are Little Brown and HarperCollins, and most recently Philomel with my Diana Taurasi book. That I think I do hear people worrying and thinking about advances, which are super important, but I also think that getting a debut that doesn't have one of those fancy advances or a whole marketing team behind you in that same way can still be super successful. And then also the way school visits support early newer writers and sort of connections and community, and doing it sort of from the grassroots up, like working and getting your books in the hands of children in that way.
Yeah. And I would just add one other thing, which is to what excellent what Monica and Kelly both said, is that you have to be thinking always forward. Like if you've got a book that's done and it's polished and you're in the query trenches, you need to be thinking and writing the next book. You can't just stay stagnant, because two things will happen. One is it's a possibility that that book's not going to get an agent, or if you have an agent, it's not going to sell. So you need to be working on something else. Well, actually three things I'm going to say. The second is that if you do get an agent call, that the agent's going to ask what you're working on next. And they want to know that you are not a one-hit wonder kind of thing, that you're working on the next thing. And then the third thing is that while you're on submission or where you're looking for an agent, you need a way to occupy your mind so that you're not always hitting the refresh button on your inbox. So working on the next story, thinking about, 3 or 4 steps ahead in your career really helps you take your mind off the worries that come with either being in the query trenches or being on submission too. So.
Yeah, excellent. Great. Anybody, Lisa or Cynthia, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I love what Monica said about craft, because I think in the few years that I've been writing, I've noticed that you really need to change up your craft especially in nonfiction writing, and be open to, changing and using different techniques, not stagnating.
Yeah, always experimenting, trying something new, listening to the feedback you're getting and so on. Yeah. All right. Shall we go, Lori? Are you ready? You're going to tell us about Many Mighty Sweeps. And it's the second book. You mentioned that it was the follow-up to Backhoe Joe, which came out, I think, in 2014.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's just a little curious, that's a long time between. And was that stressful? Just talk a little bit about how that worked.
Sure. Yeah, I was so new in green. So Backhoe Joe was the first book, this guy, the very first book that I sold. It was one of the books I queried my agent that got her attention, and it sold in auction, which was very exciting and has never happened to me since. So it was like a very, huge step in, and then kind of like, downhill after that. But so yeah, it was 3 different publishers bidding. So the advances were kind of going up and up. And then one of them threw in 2-book deal. And so then everyone countered with a 2-book deal. And then HarperCollins ended up winning that auction. And I ended up with the 2-book deal instead of just the 1. So yeah, I guess I always thought that it would be like another Backhoe Joe book or some kind of little sequel or something. And what happened was the acquiring editor left Harper to go work in YA at a different publisher, and Backhoe Joe got bumped up to like a very high level editor, like the editorial director. So I didn't have much contact with her. It was kind of well on its way. I think we talked once about book 2, and I pitched a few ideas and like sort of some like follow up to Backhoe Joe, and she's like, well, let's see how this one does first before we take on a second one. And when you're doing picture books, I mean, that could be years. So it still probably had a year to go with the illustrator and another year to see how it sold. And in the meantime, my agent had sent some other stories to her. It kind of slowed down the submission process, honestly, because we were giving Harper a first look at what I had been working on, and it took a while to hear back, and then we wouldn't submit to others until we heard from her. And I kind of was getting the same feedback. This is sweet, or this is fun, but we don't really think it will stand out with some of our other character-driven franchises. So this was back, like 10 years ago. It seemed like a lot of picture books were the character-driven sort. And this editor had Fancy Nancy, Pete the Cat, Splat the Cat, like some really big franchises that were selling like gangbusters. And here I was with just, 1 picture book under my belt. And I'm like, of course I cannot compete with Fancy Nancy. So we kind of just stopped submitting to Harper for a bit. And for other reasons, I sort of pivoted to nonfiction because I found that fascinating, and nonfiction was selling well. So I had been working on some of those chapter books, and then went the other way and started doing some of the board books. And kind of out of the blue, that high level editor ended up leaving Harper for another publisher and reached out to my agent and apologized and said she was sorry that we couldn't connect on a second book for Lori. Here's all the information for the editor that's taking my place. Maybe you could touch base. And then that new editor was fantastic. Megan Ilnitsky, she did reach out to us. She was excited. She wanted to see what I had completed. She wanted to hear pitches. So within a few months of her coming on, she had looked at some of my stuff and some ideas, and I had written Sweeps so long ago. That was the one she picked that she felt would be a nice compliment. So that is how Sweeps was sold in the 2-book deal 8 years later. So any little like kindergartner, first graders that like Backhoe Joe were in high school by the time Sweeps came out. So, but it was nice to finally get that, because I was leaving some money on the table, and it was quite an advance since it sold in auction. And I was wondering if it would just go sort of unclaimed, but yeah, it was nice to close that up and make a new relation with a new editor at Harper. So that is the origin story.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
And
so I'm sure, I don't know if any of you have done like a 2-book deal like that. I don't know if that's typical or what. At first I was excited, and then it just kind of like hung over my head for a lot of years. And yeah, it didn't leave me with the best feeling at first, but yeah, I'm glad it all kind of got buttoned up.
So just in case there are people who want advice or who are here to learn about the industry, I had a 3-book deal with
Oh, wow.
HarperCollins, but I had a very happy ending to it.
Good.
But when my vision for the 3rd book wasn't matching my editors, and it was during the same period that you're speaking of, I just submitted a different book, like completely different. And so I think it's important that we all make compromises in any industry, but sometimes there are compromises we don't want to make, and then we have different choices. That's why the route I have taken, with every major editor I've worked with, I've had more than 1 book. So I have continuing relationships with editors, but I have always chosen purposefully to be at several houses and not tried to be only at one. And I will say that the book that did not match the vision of my editor then at HarperCollins was this book. And it is in its 18th printing, has sold well over 100,000 copies. It was optioned and they developed a pilot. They ultimately passed. So this book is very, very beloved. It's not my best-selling book, but one of them. And this is the book where I was like, we're never going to come to this for my experience with the Big 5 publisher. So I published it with a smaller publisher that shared my vision, and it has been just hugely popular with children. It's in story paths all over the country. And so I think we have to, as writers, be flexible in what we think of as our different paths to success. I always tell my agent, who's really a brilliant agent, Stephanie Sanchez von Borstel at Full Circle Literary. They're all my children. To me, I don't care. She doesn't agree with me, by the way. I would take zero advance to have it go to children, be put in the book hands of children. Of course, she reins me back in that. But to me, it's like a investment and belief in the book that it will find its audience one way or another. So.
And I think this brings up, and I'm glad we're talking about this, it brings up a really good point, which is whether you're new to this, you're just starting out, or you've been in it a while, there seems to be this thing in publishing that bugs me a little bit, which is this need to kind of be quiet about things, about how the business works, and not talk about some of the more uncomfortable things. And I think that that's been changing a little bit over the years, but I love the conversation and the transparency of kind of showing the ups and downs in the business, because I feel like a lot of times when people come into this, myself included, when I started writing like 12 years ago, I was so starry-eyed, and I just thought you get an agent, you sell a book, right? You know what I mean? Like I did not realize the difficulties and the roller coaster ride. So I think the more honest we can be with newer writers and people who are learning about the business is so important, because then you go into it kind of with your eyes open, and not to say that, distract them or say that this is difficult, just so that they know that when they get into this, again, it might be a long road, and, got to work on craft and all these other things that come along with it. So I appreciate that we're having this conversation. It's really important, I think.
Yes, thank you. Good answers. All right. We want to make sure we get everyone has a chance to have a question, and then we'll open it up. Please, if you're listening, please throw your questions into the chat as well. So
the next question I think is from me, except I think it already got answered for Cynthia. Because the question, I think the premise of your book is intriguing. We were going to ask about kind of the genesis of it. So can you talk about like what you're working on next, or, your inspiration for what you're working on next? I don't know if you've got something in the pipeline that you can or cannot talk about, but I'd love to hear about kind of what's next in the works for you.
Yeah. Yes, so my next book that's coming out in April, that's a board book with Barefoot Books. And it's from the series Our World. So I think it's a really cool series. They hired a writer and illustrator from those specific countries to write about a day in the life of a preschooler in those different cultures. So I find it adorable. I think I really am enjoying the experience. So it comes out in a few months. Then I have a picture book coming out. It was supposed to come out next year. I got pushed to 2024, and that's about a story about monarch butterflies and the reserve in Mexico. And it's a parallel story with the girl that has to wait for her papa to come back from also migrating for work, and then coming back with the butterflies. So that's gonna come out spring 2024. And then I have some other unannounced things.
Nice.
Wonderful. Lisa, when you get an idea for a nonfiction picture book, where do you start with your research?
Okay, well, I just want to start off by saying that in the last few years, there have been a glut of what I write, which are picture book biographies, and it's become really increasingly hard to sell a picture book biography, which is, my love. But I do like also to write creative nonfiction, so that, is also based on research. So I've noticed, that you have to be flexible, as Amy and Monica were saying, and try to be more lyrical. You might even change genres when you're writing nonfiction. You may go from a biography to more of a creative nonfiction about an event, or about a certain historical event. But either way, whatever I'm writing at that point, I open up a folder to keep my quotes and facts from the very beginning, because I learned from my first picture book biography that I wrote way back in 2012, that I did not keep good track of all my sources. And it's really important, especially for good back matter, to have a great file folder started from the beginning with all your quotes of articles, news articles, magazine articles, any facts from, primary sources, in your folder. Even if you're not writing a biography, any other creative nonfiction, editors really will want you to have good back matter. And I also noticed, that I have tried to become less factual and more fun in writing for kids. I started out with the background in journalism way back in the 1980s, and wrote for newspapers back in New York and New Jersey. So I'm very used to, gathering facts and doing research. But how do you apply that to get to the heart of, what a child will relate to in a picture book? So when I was writing Rosalind, and I thought about her as a young child, yes, she was into math and science from an early age, but she was also into taking photos, and she got a camera. And, because I was able to find those kind of facts in doing the research, I was able to link the idea of her loving photography at an early age to her taking photos of DNA, and carry that throughout the book. So I think you have to find, that hook in whatever you're writing, a picture book, middle grade, you have to find a hook, in the voice of that character. And I've also learned from my agent, Rena Rossner, who herself is a great writer, to be more lyrical and less factual, to be more sensory in my writing. I think I've seen a change in the newer books I've been working on. Right now I'm out on sub with a very, very short, I think it's 250 word lyrical book about the desert. And I never thought I'd see myself writing a 250 word picture book, coming from nonfiction, where most of the books I had to cut down from 1,200 or 1,500 words, down to below 1,000. So, but I do I do want to recommend for any writers, new writers, that you never throw out any of your original research that you put in that file folder you start, because you never know when some of that might be asked to be put back in by the editor. So keep a good running folder of your research from the beginning.
Good suggestions.
Yeah.
I know others of you have written nonfiction too, so we'll maybe get back to that, but let's finish up with Monica. And I think Amy, you have that?
Yeah. Okay, so you've shown us this beautiful book that you've written, the Turquoise Room, and I just really want to know, because I've heard so many wonderful stories, what is the experience like working with an illustrator and having them kind of bring your words to life with beautiful photos? I think just an amazing part of the process, and I'd love to hear about it more.
Thanks. That's my biggest joy. Like, picture book is the place where text meets art, and that's what makes it magical to me as the daughter of an artist growing up with paintings and my mom's friends, other artists. So I felt like it was the perfect genre for me. I've written as a scholar and as a journalist. And then when I had children, I wanted to create books for them. I've gotten to work with amazing illustrators. Everything's different. So I like to build relationships. So I have like 3 books with John Parra, who's a good friend too, Waiting for the Biblioburo, and Frida and her Animalitos. And we talked about that 3-book deal. Instead of Marisol McDonald, I submitted nonfiction, and I got to publish my 2nd book with Rafael Lopez. You may know him. He's amazing. So I think it's really delightful when I have a closer relationship to the illustrator. It's fun to sometimes have a more collaborative approach, but usually, as all writers know, they keep you far away and you communicate through editors and art directors. I like working with brand new illustrators, like using whatever, cultural capital that I have to say, bring in new voices. And so John and Raphael's first picture books, I got to publish with them. They were already well-established artists. And Adriana Garcia, who's so brilliant, had a book out, an amazing book out with Selena Gomez. I'm going to get her name wrong, so I better not say it. But she was also an amazing muralist, and I had seen her art in San Antonio, and I had said to my agent, please, I want to do a book with Adriana. So we got to reach out and do it. So it's really a joyful part, with some exceptions sometimes when there's some tension and vision, but that has been like brief exceptions over a long period. I've written over 30 children's books, and each have had an illustrator, even if it's different for like a chapter book. And there's very few times it has not been pure collaborative hard work and joy together. So sort of a general answer.
Nice, that's beautiful. I just am always so curious, and I just think it's such a beautiful part of the publishing process to be able to do that. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Okay, this is going to be, we're going to have one last question for Cynthia and Lisa. And you are both debuts. So can you just talk about what that experience has been like? How maybe, is it different than you expected? And maybe it was different also because of COVID, and kind of what tips do you have? What have you learned? Would you do some things different? What will you do for your next book that maybe you take away from this experience? And why don't we start with Cynthia?
Oh, okay. Yes, what a ride. It is surprising. It was, even though I expected it to be really busy, like just as when it comes out. I try to do, I think my suggestion would be to try to do things as much as you can beforehand. So I did all the blog posts and all those things before, because I thought, well, I'm going to be really busy with the events when the book is finally out. And I think a good surprise was that you know, like it's been 2 years since the pandemic started. So there were some in-person events. So that was nice that we got to do that. I'm sure, like, I know authors last year or in 2020 didn't get to do that, and that's must have been really hard. So there were a lot of things through Zoom, some panels and conferences, but there were also in-person events, and that was very nice to actually read your book with the kids. So that was nice. There were not a lot of them because not all of the stores were doing events yet. So the part that was surprising is that it was really busy months afterwards. So I didn't expect that, and I guess that's something to be expected. But because there's more events, and then there's more, you know, things that just come up, and it's just this constant email. It's just that I wasn't prepared for that, for the amount of time it takes. Like I did not write anything for months, you know, like just focusing on that. So that takes a lot of time. Although it's very, very joyful. It's such a wonderful experience to finally have the book in your hands and have kids read it, and they share their pictures or whatever with you know, that they're reading it. It's amazing. That is really like full circle, the experience. It's wonderful. So yeah, I guess that's yeah.
It was nice that you kind of came at the sort of tail end ish of you know, things started to open up, so there was a little more opportunity to do things. Because yeah, disappointing to have books come out during the pandemic.
One more thing I wanted to add before I forget, my suggestion is also like join a group, because Diane and Lori are part of my group, and I thought it was so cool that it wasn't just a debut picture book group for the year. It was called PB Crew 22. So it's for all creators that have books coming out in 2022. Like, so we got to be, you know, and share experiences and also ask questions with creators like Diane and Lori that had a lot of experience with stores and, you know, with all of these things. And then in the group we shared a lot, and that was so helpful to find your way around, but also to have that like support. So that was something I would recommend.
Yeah, and I mean, somebody, Lori, I think you asked me to join the group, but I don't know like how, like if someone wanted to have a group like that, how would they get started?
Cynthia, were you one of the ones that started it, right?
Yeah, so it was Laura and Lisa, and then we were like, hey, let's just make a new one, because I guess I think towards the end of the year, if you have a book coming out the next year, that's when people start grouping together, and then groups, I guess, you know, get full, and then they're just like, okay, so we'll just accept like 15 or 20 people, because it's hard work also. So that's why we just thought, oh, let's just create our own and invite people that we know and see if they want to join. And that's, but I think if you have a book coming out, then if you ask around, hey, do you know that, then what we got, I think we got a lot of DMs asking, hey, do you know of other groups?
That's true.
Oh, and then we just connected with other groups as well that had books coming out 2022 and 2023. So and so that we send out, you know, people so that they had those resources.
Yeah. Okay, how about you, Lisa? Was your experience different because you have nonfiction? So maybe, I don't know, was that different or the same, or?
I had a really positive experience this year. Like Cynthia, I was in a book promotion group with 12 other writers. We're called Kid Lit Caravan. And about 4 of the 12 had picture book biographies, and the rest were fiction. But, you know, it's great to be with debut writers, promoting each other's books. And now we talk about school visits. You know, a lot of us are doing school visits, and it's our first time. So we can, you know, commiserate on sharing, you know, some of those details of our first school visits. But the other thing is that I'm really grateful for my publisher. Beaming Books is, I guess, a mid-sized publisher, but they provided me with, you know, a publicist from the beginning, a marketing plan, things that I thought I'd be doing on my own, which you don't always get for a debut book. You know, they've put me a little bit out of my comfort zone in having some interviews in public, which, you know, is not my thing, but, you know, it worked out well. And what I'm thrilled about is, you know, for our debut book, how the library systems, you know, nationally and even internationally have been buying the book. Not to say that independent bookstores haven't been supporting it, but so far, most of my first month sales have been through libraries, which, you know, as a former librarian, I'm not too unhappy about that. But, you know, it's been a you know, pretty positive year, having some good reviews in the press, like, you know, from Junior Library Guild or other places, and then having some nasty reviews from one other place, which I won't mention, which has library in their title. You know, it's an interesting experience as a first-time writer. You learn a lot from your first book, but it's been mostly positive.
Great. And I think everyone would agree that having others that you can kind of pass all your questions through and who will support you, and which is one of the reasons why we love SCBWI, because it is a community that of people who are interested in the same things that we're interested in. So I don't know that we have any questions from the audience, but we have a few final questions. And do you want to choose one of those ones on the second part of the list, or I can start, Amy?
How about we do talk about your path to publication just a little bit. I know that can be a long story for everybody, but maybe just a quick little blurb about how long you wrote and what book you signed with your agent on.
And maybe you didn't have an agent when you sold your first book. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Laura, do you mind starting?
Sure. Yeah, I was just saying Backhoe Joe was my first book, but yeah, this morning we had our Kidlit mingle, the Ask Us Anything mingle, and I was saying I love to share my story because it is pretty standard. I queried agents that I researched. I had 3 polished picture books ready to go, and I got an agent who was interested, had the call, signed. It wasn't anything like a breakout star at a conference or I won a Twitter pitch or anything. It was just like the things that we've been trying to share with new writers. This is how it works, the step-by-step, and that's how I started. I had been writing probably for a few years and just kind of poking around and maybe sending some things out to smaller publishers, and then you just end up in that slush pile, and it you just kind of languish there. You get those really vague thanks but no thanks that don't really help you improve your craft. I joined SCBWI, but there wasn't as much going on. There wasn't monthly meetups or anything really happening, and I kind of had that imposter syndrome. I didn't go to like any big conferences or anything. So yeah, I kind of just felt my way around, and there is a lot of great information online. So I started there. I actually got an offer for Backhoe Joe from a small publisher right before I signed with my agent. So I let her know that, and I'm glad we hung on to it, and she wanted to try some other publishers instead. So it made a much bigger splash that way. But yeah, I just kind of did it the standard way. And I was one of those, read tons of books to my kids, lived in the library in the kids section, always went to story time and wanted to see if I could do it myself. And it was the thing about learning that you don't have to know an illustrator or do the illustrations yourself that kind of opened it up to me. Once I learned that you really just have to write a strong story, that's when I wanted to give it a shot.
Excellent. How about you, Kelly?
Yes. So, well, basically, the book I got my agent with was my second book. I think I've been on here before talking about how like forever, for like 2 years, I was writing this vampire detective novel that my friends, including poor dear Amy here, were reading, and no one really liked it all. Even though they were really gracious about it. But so I had been doing that for like 2 years, and I had this character in that particular book that was like a plucky kind of plus size fashionista best friend, and everyone was kind of telling me like, oh, you know, this book, yeah, it's got some pacing problems, but I really like this one character. And I had just gotten really frustrated, and I'm like, fine, I'm just gonna write a book about this character, okay? And so I did, and that became the book Fat Girl on a Plane. And I actually got my first agent through a contest, which I don't think is super common, but Amy and another person, Michelle Hawk, who is also a literary agent now, if anyone is querying, she's an agent. They used to host a contest. They used to host 2 contests, since I'm kind of like drawing a blank as to which one I really got my agent through. I'm thinking it was Sun versus Snow. That was like, it was basically like where you would get to post like, I think your query in the first couple of the pages, and I got some agent requests from there, and that's how I connected with my first agent. My second 2 agents I just found through conventional querying, just like by doing the conventional thing of writing a query letter. Lori is pretty lucky in that she's only been with one person. I think that that's getting more and more rare these days. So yeah.
I think that's a good point, because a lot of people think, you know, that's what you are going for. And, you know, of course, if it works.
I think that is what we are all going for. Whether or
Yeah,
not we're going to get
know,
it, I don't know.
Well, yeah, except the truth is that that's not the case for a lot of people. And so it normalizes it to hear that, you know, people switch agents, you know, for a variety of reasons, and it's okay. You know, you live to sell your next book, and you know, there's ups and downs, and that's sometimes one of them. So it's good to hear that that happens.
Diane, I noticed we have a question from an audience member.
Oh, are you? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. How do you deal with rejection? Yeah, that's a tough one. So who wants to take that one?
I'll take that.
It's such a big thing, because I think you think at a certain point you'll be over it, like you won't be rejected. But you know, published authors get rejected all the time, so it's part of it, and you do have to learn to steel yourself for it. So go ahead, Monica, give us some good words of wisdom.
I love this question, and when I do writing workshops, though it's been a while since I've done the in-person kind, since before COVID, I always say you usually can't be guaranteed something in a workshop, but I can give you a 100% guarantee, and that's that if you don't try, you will not get published. So I feel like my greatest skill as an author is actually that I take rejection well, and that I can, sometimes there's growth that is needed in terms of craft, but that somehow only in this sphere, not in my personal life, not even in my university or teacher life, I'm very sensitive and with humans and friends, but with my writing, I have been able to get rejections and not let it affect the core of what I believe in and what I'm doing. And some of my most rejected books have been most successful. And so I'll use the metaphor of from Harry Potter, where with the sword of Gryffindor, you know how it absorbs things, but then makes it stronger in terms of killing Horcruxes, the venom. So I kind of feel like if we can take that in and let it not affect our core belief in what we're doing, not in a foolish way where you think I can't grow, I'm not wrong, but I've just had too many experiences where even maybe, you know, people who love me and believe in me and think I'm a good writer want to say, well, take a break, even like an agent or a favorite editor who might say, well, you have to do this, or I don't think it's going to work. If I really believe it, I hold on to it. And now it's great because if my agent and I don't have a perfect vision about something, I'll say, but remember this book? I know we can sell it this way. So I guess it's like, have there be search for some core in yourself that is a type of self-belief, and know that so many writers get rejected. And so persistence, grit, determination is to me like a super essential part of the writer personality. There's a lot of creative human beings in this world. I love it. That's why I like being a teacher, bringing that out. But not everyone has the discipline to keep tapping away the lonely work of actual writing, and then the grit to take rejection and keep going and think, okay, my life's going to be defined not how I respond to things going well, but how I respond to things not going great, right? Those are the things that matter ultimately.
So I feel like this question actually has two parts. And one is how to deal with rejection internally and, how to deal with kind of like the feelings that you have about rejection. And the other with how to deal with rejection professionally, which I think the answer is always graciously. Like, I mean, like you can never tell where people are going to land in this business. And like one thing I always emphasize is if you get a rejection from an agent or an editor, the answer is thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, even if it feels bad or it hurts, you don't know where that person is going to end up. And the agent that rejects you today might be interested in your next thing. So I think that it's like there's always this process of trying to manage your feelings versus like what you're doing out in public professionally. So I feel like being gracious about rejection, even if you think the person's wrong or you don't want to take their feedback or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But just being gracious if anyone's giving you feedback and just kind of realizing that like, that's just part of the process that we're all in. Now, internally, I just think like people have got to have some kind of coping mechanisms, whether that's like if you go home and you punch a pillow or you have like friends that you just like trust that you can vent to, like for the next 2 minutes, I'm just going to really complain about this thing that happened to me. So I guess that like those are my two kinds of things. But I always just think like, on the outside, just keep calm and carry on. On the inside, that's a different story.
Yeah. I think the thing is true, much to Kelly's point too, is that you got to find your people, your writer friends. And when you have great news or when you have bad news, those are the times to lean into those friendships and just vent privately to those people that you can trust, and not do it publicly. Don't get on Twitter or don't do anything that, because publishing is very small. And as Kelly is saying, if you burn that bridge, you don't know that editor is then going to move to another house and they could have your manuscript and remember you. So just be professional at all times. And again, it can be frustrating. I mean, I've had moments where I've gotten like four rejections in one day, and I just kind of close my computer and I go have a little bit of a sad moment, and I reach out to a writing friend and they make me feel better. And then I just take a deep breath and move on. So again, point being, just always try to be professional.
I like to share them also, not like word for word, but I like to talk to the kids at school visits about rejection as well, just so they know, like they see the final product that we're so excited to read to them. But I tell them it's just like when they go to soccer practice or are learning to play an instrument, that writing takes a lot of practice and a lot of redoing. And it's not always perfect the first time. And some people might not like the story that you wrote, but other people might, and that you can't give up. So I'll get them started early for those future writers. They're ready.
Yeah. Such good points. Community, the inner strength that you have to build, and just the fact of it is there's a lot of rejection, and it's not personal. It's the hard part, I think, for me is sometimes you don't understand, like you don't understand what's wrong with your story, and no one seems to be able to actually tell you in a way that you can fix. That can be frustrating. But another piece of this, which I have seen and sometimes do myself, is a story that you love, maybe almost there, and an editor just can't pick it up. But separate yourself from it for a while, put it in the drawer and actually leave it there, and write something different. I have friends who just keep pulling out the same stories over and over again, almost like, I know there's a solution and if I can just keep working on it, but it doesn't usually work that way. I mean, distance is really important. So anybody else want to talk about that rejection question? Norma, did that help you?
Yeah, I want to add something that Kelly was saying, that it's like the story is like, and then the rejection is getting to a point where it needs to be perfect, or the editors are going to be like, it's my experience that it's becoming more difficult. And also I've received more R&Rs, like revise and resubmit. And so, and then before you might think, okay, so I'm changing the story to the editor's feedback, so they will pick it up, and it doesn't necessarily happen. So I got a couple times, and then my agent asked, like, do you want to do this? Like, do you want to do another R&R for this story? But I'm stubborn, so I was like, yes, I'll do it, because I know that this can be a good book. And then, like, well, like you said, sometimes we can't find the way to make that story work, but I've done it. So that's also a path. Like, it's happening more. It's happening. I've done it a few times, and sometimes I would say, like, if I don't agree with the feedback, I'm like, I'm not gonna do that because it's not. And I've done that. Like, I don't agree with this like vision of how this story should be told. But when I do, and sometimes you find that feedback, and it's like, yes, I'm gonna do it yet once again. And actually, that time worked. So you never know, but then if you get the right feedback, you might make it work. So yes, it's hard.
And then again, sometimes you get feedback and you don't want to, like for my Lola series, which are like 6 books, she's a soccer player, and I had an editor that wanted her to have a superpower, another that wanted her to change to being an instrument. And I even tried the superpower because I thought that could be fun, right? But I told my friend I wrote a few chapters with the superpower, and I told my friend who actually wrote superpower book, like hero books, and she's like, she can fly. You picked the most boring superpower and you didn't show how she got her powers. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. So it took longer to sell, but then it sold in a preempt, actually. So it was so funny, but it takes a lot of time. So I like the advice to set it aside. And yet I do tenaciously revise and resubmit when editors want it. I never say, no, I'm too fancy, if it doesn't change the whole core of something.
Mhm.
And then finally, you can get a little bit of revenge. I've been lucky to sell almost all my manuscripts, but there was one that I loved called El Poetry Cafe that my agent wasn't thrilled about, and it didn't sell in the first round. But I have a chapter book series, and I managed to put it into a theater performance one of my characters was doing. So the story got published sideways in another one of my books, and I highly recommend that. If you can, you still can have a way to get your work out there that you believe in, or in an essay or some other way that isn't always the form you envisioned for it.
Right. So we're going to have to close, but we had one last question, and maybe you could just give everyone can just give a quick answer. How long was your book out on submission by your agent before an editor expressed interest? So maybe just a quick, like, what's your average submission process timing, I guess? People might not know, it takes a while.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an average. Usually, I think I've sold something like once, maybe one thing, those board books, the Future Babies, sold like right away, but everything else seemed to have gone a few rounds. My one that won the Cybert Honor Award, the nonfiction All in a Drop, was like roundly rejected as a picture book, and I revised to a chapter book, and then it did great and won that award. So yeah, you never know. And it really varies, at least for me.
I think I just got super lucky. Like both of my rounds of submission went really fast. Like I'm thinking like 6 or 8 weeks, which is really unusual.
I've had it all, like I said, a book like Marisol McDonald, or I wrote a Frida book that when everybody else was coming out with one. So then that took longer, but then I've had editors come to me with ideas too. So it has varied really.
I think Rosalind sold in a second round to editors. So maybe after the first 6 months, it went out again. And then we had 2 editors who were interested pretty quickly. So that was pretty good.
So how about you, Cynthia?
Yeah, Cuidad Sings, it was a few months. I don't remember, about 4 months or something like that. And the other one was, the other one was different. It took longer, I'm gonna say, but there was a revision, so that we had to send out, because I got a mentorship, and then so I revised with my mentor, and then so it just had it, only a few people had it, and then so I don't know, it was a few months for both of them, I guess.
So basically, it varies. It changes by book, by project. Maybe time of year. Things like COVID change a lot of things too. So, well, we appreciate the time that you've taken. We're so glad that we get to celebrate with you. And I will be dropping one last time the links for all of your books in the chat. We hope that participants, visitors, whatever, listeners too, will look for your books at Changing Hands. And we also want to say we were sorry that Sarah Noble could not join us today, but I do have the link for her books in the chat as well. And any final words, Amy?
I don't think so. This has been so much fun. Thank you, Diane, for letting me join you today. It was really fun. And I've seen you most of you somewhere on the social media. So it's kind of nice to finally see your faces and say hello. So thanks for letting me do this again.
And for anybody watching, please follow all of these authors. And you know, Arizona authors, we want to support each other. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you found this very helpful. We appreciate your time, and please go buy everyone's books. So,
Thank you.
Thanks so much for everything. Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
You guys did awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good. Well, I think we hit all the questions, and good. We're all set.
It was all good. Yeah.
Good.
It should have recorded. So if you shut it off, you can just shut it off and it'll be fine. It'll stop it. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for
launching. I didn't do much. I was just listening.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Bye.
Bye.